Hi, it's Florian, and in this video I'm going to talk about how to report from Scrum projects the way management really loves it. So as a former Scrum Master, a manager of engineering, and someone who did a lot with reporting, I want to share my experience and some tools that I use to please management and to give them grounds for their decision making from Scrum projects. So, first thing you can do is actually use the Scrum KPIs, which is the velocity, which is the backlog, and a burn down chart. So that is really easy to see. You can just draw this burn down chart that you know from Scrum. You can explain what the velocity is, what your backlog is, and how you interpolate to the release date. You can also explain what happens if you descope or if you add scope to the project. And that is already really helpful for managers. And that is also the thing that Scrum usually promotes for reporting. It is the KPIs that come from Scrum, but it's not the KPIs that come from a return on invest calculation, for example. So the second tip I can give you is actually to use some more sophisticated tools, like for example a plot where you use the sprint velocity and also the full-time employees or FTEs working in a sprint. You know, the number of employees working in a sprint might change because of sick leave, because of vacation days, because management decided to put someone in the team because it was too slow, or to put someone out of the team because some other project needed someone. These things happen. They shouldn't with Scrum, but they actually do. So it's really important, if you have a chart that shows the velocity, to show also how many people worked in the sprint. And that chart I show on the top of my video, so you can see how that might look like. It is really easy to read, which is important for every chart, and it really gives a benefit because you can always explain if the velocity change is due to a change in people in the sprint. So it also prevents management from changing the team size too often, because they will understand what that means for the project. So that was the second tip. The third tip is using a chart management actually knows from financials. It is telling you from a baseline backlog what work was added during the proceeds of the project and which work was removed or descoped. It also tells you how much work was already done by the team and how much is left. So you can see where you are in the project, where the effort came from, if there was effort added or removed. All of that you can see quite easily. And the good thing is this kind of charts is already well known to management by the reporting of the figures of their company. They use the same kind of charts to see where wins and losses come from. So it is really easy for them to see, and it is really helpful to put it into your reporting if you report from a Scrum project. Next thing you can do, or you should do, is actually tell people how much the project costs. So how much did it cost yet? How much will it cost in the future? And all of that are really important information for management, and it should be easy for you to find them out. And it usually is, because what you usually do is you track how many hours people work on a project. So people book their hours in some kind of booking tool or put them into Excel once a week, once a sprint. It doesn't really matter, but you need to know how many hours an employee worked on the project, and then you need to know how much 1 hour costs. So you have an hourly rate and you multiply it by the hours that people spent, and that is how you come to what you spent already on the project. What you can do then, and that is where Scrum comes in, you can see how many story points did you already finish in this time frame you already worked on the project, and then you can divide the number of the money you spent by the number of story points, and you see how much money you spent per story point, which is then really important to estimate how much money you will spend until the project is finished, which is then just the number of story points that is left to do until the project is finished times the cost per story point. So if you want to report the total cost, you report the cost that you already know, that is what was spent, calculated with the hourly rate, and you add the costs that you estimate will happen in the future, multiplied with the number of the cost per story point, and you find out the total cost of the project. So that is also an easy thing to do. I also show you an example here. You can see how that works out, how you could report something like that. So that was the tip. Last tip, you should leverage all you get from the return on invest calculation. For every project, Scrum or not, there should be a return on invest calculation in a company. And there are a lot of things you can learn from that. So, and a lot of things that help you and help management to decide what to do with the project. It's not only the Scrum figures, it's also something like, how much does delay cost? How much does it cost if we spend 1 sprint longer or 2 sprint longer? And this cost is not only the cost that of work, the labor costs, it's also the cost of not selling the product. It's the cost that you have if a competitor comes faster to the market than you do. All of these add, and it is much more than just the labor cost. And you should be aware of it to know if it makes sense to speed up the project with putting more resources in, putting more money on it, whatever. And that is something the management really wants to know. There are also other figures, like for example the cost of goods sold, which is how much it costs to produce a product, which is important if it's not a software, but if it is hardware, an embedded system, a mechanical thing you want to sell and do with Scrum. You should always know how much the production costs, and that should also be part of your reporting. Another thing that should be a part of your reporting is the revenue you want to make with the product. You should always be aware of that. How much do you earn with it? And that is impacted by, of course, inflation. So inflation of price and also inflation of costs that you have for R&D. And then there's something called weighted average cost of capital, or WACC, which tells you actually how much the money that you spend for your team, your engineering, actually costs the company, which is the interest rate if you have to borrow it, or the interest rate you could get from it if you would invest it somewhere else. So all of this is represented by the WACC figure, and you should also report that. And you should calculate that to the interest rate you get from inflation. So you should have some financial figures in it also. You can take them from the return on invest. You can also ask management what they would like to see. That is always a good idea. Just give them an example, or give them maybe a proposal of how you would like to report. Ask them if they like it. If they don't, they will tell you, and they will maybe tell you, I would like to see this figure or this figure. It depends a bit on the company, but you should not, and that is what I learned, only take the KPIs from Scrum. You should spice them a bit with, I would say, business figures, and then everything is okay. So maybe the examples I showed you helped. You can use them as a guideline for your own reporting. You can use them as they come, just as you like. So thanks for watching. If you have questions, post them in the comments. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel.